And I have no better time anytime than right now, because I get to go sit down, have myself a nice cold one, and listen to the greatest rock and roll guitar player in the world, Mr. Eddie Van Halen.
Hello, world. This is Chris Aballo's podcast experiment, and I am Chris Aballo. Welcome to the show, where I'm joined once again by my part-time co-host, Jack DeFranco.
Hello again, everybody.
And returning, once again, the always entertaining Ryan Taggart.
Hey, guys.
And what I think is his Cape debut. You know him as Metal Jimmy from the only podcast that matters, even though his real name is James K. Hi, Jimmy.
Hey, it's good to talk with you guys again.
Yeah,
Jimmy
likewise.
James.
Glad we're able to put this together. It's funny too, because Jimmy was like the last person who I kind of hadn't done a one-on-one chat with, so that was actually going to be the original intention for this show. Like the only person I kind of didn't check in with via the show during quarantine, and now this came up, and so that kind of changed the plan a little bit. Now it's going to be about Eddie Van Halen, who passed away last Tuesday, October 6th, which was a surprise, and not too much of a surprise, because there have been rumors for a while that he wasn't doing well, rumors about him getting cancer treatment, or that his cancer had come back, which is a bit of a drag. Of course, just even hearing that was like, oh, come on, we're hoping to see Van Halen at some point again, in some incarnation, at least knowing that they would exist, because they've been so kind of back and forth, and there have been big gaps in between when the band's been active. It would have been great to actually have the band around again. So anyway, unfortunately, the guy passed away, and we have a lot to talk about. We've probably talked Van Halen more than any other band. Certainly one of the bands we talked about most during the years of the only podcast that matters, almost at every opportunity, whether it was favorite albums or putting down David Lee Roth or talking about how great Sammy Hagar is or whatever.
Bashing the new album.
There was a lot of Van Halen material for sure.
We
came back to it again and again.
We did. Well, literally in 2012, when the last album, what now we know is the last album, came out, we dedicated an entire half-cast to it. We literally spent a half hour basically complaining about, like, this sucks.
What was the album's name again? I can't even remember.
Different Kind of Truth.
That's it.
Wow.
It took me a second to remember. I was like, I think it was a different, because I think we called it A Better Kind of Truth.
That was the name of our half-cast.
Yeah, we were like, this sucks, and we don't want to. We cannot sign off on this.
Boy,
which was funny.
Completely forgot that.
for context, and we'll talk about Van Halen as a whole. But myself and Jack and Ryan are all very much part of Hagar Nation, whereas Jimmy prefers David Lee Roth. And
by far.
I converted from the Church of Roth, but yeah.
Yeah, Jack eventually came around.
Yes.
I'll tell that story a little bit later on in the show.
Jack
You were an early convert. I don't think it really took us very long.
No, it was like, you should buy this album. Like, I don't know. I'll listen to it. Okay.
That was
Okay.
Jack back at the time, like 2010, 2011. He was just like, just Diamond Dave. It just doesn't get any better than that. And I'm like, okay, we think you're very wrong.
But
Even, and it was something like that. That's how I remember it, which is probably wrong. But even Andrew, who doesn't particularly like Van Halen, was just like, no, Sammy Hagar is way better. And it's like, far be it for him to give praise to anybody. But lo and behold.
Obviously you have to give something to David Lee Roth. I mean, their albums did sell amazingly. And as a front man altogether, he was pretty incredible. And he had command of the stage. The only problem that I really ever had is that his lyrics are impossibly dumb. A significant amount of the time.
They're a party band. That's it.
Yeah.
Those 6 albums are party band albums.
The lyrics are bullshit, and I like my singers to be able to sing more than they can do splits. That's just
right.
I
agree.
I'm old fashioned.
Yeah.
That's the way I like it. But so my memory, and I want to get to everybody, but I'm gonna kind of start out with the first, and I want you guys to think about if you know the first Van Halen, if you can remember the first time you heard Van Halen. And in my case, I didn't know it was Van Halen, the song I heard. Well, the first one I heard was When It's Love, but I didn't know it was Van Halen at the time. I just remember hearing it on the radio circa 88, when I was a kid, 6, 7 years old, and you would just listen to FM radio, that's where all the bands were, because rock bands were huge in the 80s. So it wasn't that odd to hear those songs on the radio. That was the mainstream music at the time. But I didn't know it was Van Halen. The first Van Halen song I heard that I knew was Van Halen was probably Jump. But for me, Van Halen was there were 3 bands and 3 albums in particular, which really got me off on a tear and influenced me. Or I should say, gave me the impulse to want to play guitar, which was Aerosmith's Big Ones, which kind of summed up the 3 Geffen albums that they did in the late 80s and early 90s.
I had that on cassette. Big Ones.
My sister
I have
had
fond memories of that.
My sister had the CD, which I copied onto a cassette. Yeah. And it was that. It was Def Leppard's Adrenalize, which I think I took out from the public library or something. I don't remember if I owned it yet on CD. I feel like that one took a while for me to get on CD, but I think once again I took the cassette out of the public library and then copied it, made a cassette copy of it, and the Van Halen Best of, which I don't remember if I had Balance first. I really don't remember, but I want to say it was the best of because I was definitely like a high school freshman. And then when I was a sophomore, I started playing guitar. But those 3 albums, listening to it, I just said, oh, I want to play guitar. And I was like, it's 6 strings. How hard can it be? Not realizing actually the mechanics of playing guitar is just the idea, when you're 14 of, I want to play guitar. So in that sense, Van Halen and Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing certainly was just a huge influence on me, in as much as like, I want to make that sound. And, when you hear something with the bombast and the brilliance of their best ever song, Pound Cake, my opinion, then I said, I want to do that. I want to be able to make that sound. So that's honestly what it was about for me. I said, I after hearing those albums, between Aerosmith and Van Halen and Def Leppard, I said, I want to play guitar. That's what I want to do. I said it when I was a kid, when I was into Springsteen, because I think that initial kind of, in New Jersey it was inescapable, but I feel like it was like, I'm going to play guitar and sing, because he was everywhere. Especially around here. And I said, you know what? That's what I want to do. But I was 5. So I also wanted to be a fireman when I was 5. So I don't know how long either phase lasted. But getting into high school and being a teenager, I said, I'm going to play guitar. So that was it was definitely a push in the direction. I can thank Eddie Van Halen in part for that. And like I said, When It's Love was the first song I heard, but I didn't know it was them. But Jump was still getting pretty decent airplay in the late 90s, because it was still at that point was on the road to being
the go-to
classic.
Van Halen song to put on the radio.
It is.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's like, hey, 80s flashback weekend. It's the only Van Halen song they play. So.
Well, now, exactly. That is the first Van Halen song that gets played, and that's probably the signature song, because you can't.
Panama.
Yeah.
Yeah, to a lesser extent, but Panama too. Yeah, but Jump is the only Van Halen song that a lot of people even know, even at this point, which is bewildering to me, but it's still true. Like,
absolutely.
I thought Panama was originally named Animal when I first heard the song.
Animal.
Yeah,
because Roth is unintelligible.
Yeah,
because the song has nothing to do with Panama itself.
Yeah, not at all.
It has to
not
do with...
I got the greatest. It's like, oh, it's Panama. Oh, well, I can see why that could be confused. He can't really sing that well. So.
Can you point that out on a map? Or
Right. Well, that's it. Isn't the whole point of the song like to get this girl to feel you up in your car?
Lotion, Panama Jack.
Yeah. Panama Jack. Yeah, that's why Jack took that song as just like, this is my theme.
About suntan lotion.
This is the kind of song that I'm all about, because I think he's singing about me and about summer and about my town. We'll go in a descending order. So Jack, you're going to go last. So Ryan, being the second oldest, how about you? What was your first awareness of Van Halen as a kid?
Likewise, it was definitely Jump was the first song I had ever heard. I didn't necessarily become a fan or even look into them, based on that song alone at that point, because I was a kid. And I had heard Right Now, that was in the Crystal Pepsi commercial.
Oh yeah,
back in the 90s when I was I don't know, 8 or 9 at that point. But the first Van Halen record I owned was Balance in 1995, and I was probably 11 when that came out. And that was when I became a fan. I was like, this record is just awesome. I'd heard Can't Stop Loving You and Not Enough. That was all over VH1 and MTV at the time, and I was like, these songs are great. and I had no awareness of Sammy Hagar before that, other than right now. And then it took me a while after that to like really get back into Van Halen. Like I had that record, when I was, 11 or 12 years old, and it probably wasn't until I started really hanging out with you guys that I started to dig back a little bit into, the earlier Sammy records, and even develop some appreciation for a lot of the older stuff. Because there were some really good songs musically, obviously during the Roth era. You can't deny that.
Totally.
But yeah, it would be a while for me before I like really, really got into them. But it just sucks though that I'll never get to see them.
I know that is a big drag, because that's something I know we were hoping for a while. Was that, there's going to be a big tour, and Sammy always said he was up for it. I mean, in the last however many years, he wanted to do a tour with he and Roth, and they would both sing their songs. And what better way to there would have been no better way for that band to go out, honestly, if they did they consciously did one more tour, would have been perfect for them to actually honor those two big eras of the band, because you can't dispute, the popularity of, those two.
And I would have paid a large sum of money for that.
Oh, I would have too. Show. I would have too. I was almost when Sherry and I went and saw Sammy in the Circle it was around September of 2015. Out in the desert. Where the hell were we? I don't remember where we were. It was some casino we had to drive like 2 hours to. And what was it? The Palisades or something? I don't remember. I don't remember the name of the casino. It's somewhere in the California desert. And I literally almost cried when they started playing Pound Cake. I was just like, it's about time. I'm finally seeing this song played live. Because
that's definitely my favorite guitar song from the Sammy era from Eddie. Without a doubt.
How does it sound live? How does it sound live? Is it just the same or magical?
I mean, it was great because, Vic Johnson's an amazing guitar player anyway. Just the fact that he can play all of the Van Halen stuff and the Montrose stuff, and not in a copycat kind of way. Which I'll never miss an opportunity to knock David Lee Roth, which is exactly what David Lee Roth does. He gets Eddie Van Halen clones to tour as his guitar players. But anyway, Vic Johnson is able to play all those parts with his own style, but it's still very, very faithful to the Van Halen version. So just hearing that song performed live, because we'd seen Chickenfoot in 2011, which is Sammy Michael Anthony, and they didn't play any Van Halen songs because that was not that band's thing.
Right.
But the Circle plays everything. They play the Van Hagar, for lack of a better term, as people have dubbed it. They play Sammy solo stuff. They play Montrose. They play Led Zeppelin because Jason Bonham is the drummer in the band. So that band plays everything. So to be able to play all that was amazing. But it
did he do the drill?
I believe so. He must have. How can he not?
Yeah.
So
the electric drill in the beginning was so mind blowing, and
oh god,
Eddie's like the harmonics in that song that he does, like it sends a tingle up my spine still every time I hear it.
I worked hard to nail that song down, because I was like, I knew of and get a little guitar nerdy here, but like I knew you could do harmonics on like the 5th, 7th, and 12th frets, and then I was like, how is he doing this? Oh, you could do harmonics on any fret, so that's why he's going between 5 and 4 in this section. That's how he does all those harmonics during the verse. It's like, how does he do that? Well, it's because he's Eddie Van Halen. He figured out you can do it all over the goddamn neck. So
yep.
So yeah, it's like, of course he can. Which I remember. Sorry, I'm gonna get back to everybody else. I know I'm gonna get again guitar nerdy, but I remember sometime when I was in high school. I remember I popped into a music store. I was hanging out with my friend James, different James, in Point Pleasant, and we popped into a music store that was there. I think it was Clarizio's. And they had the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge sheet music book, which had the guitar tab on it, which basically tells you, for non-guitar players, it tells you where to put your fingers on the frets, the fret numbers. If you want to voice, a solo or a chord or whatever, it shows you where to put your fingers. And I just remember looking at the chords in Pound Cake and saying, what is this? Like, I don't even understand. It may well have just been an entire page printed in Chinese. And I would have understood it just as much, even though, like, I understand numbers. I'm just thinking, what does that chord even look like? Without actually having it under my, getting your fingers on a neck and actually figuring it out. But just looking at it was blew my mind. But that was after, maybe playing a year or something where I just couldn't conceive of. It's kind of hard to, anyway. I mean, as a non-musician for, the early portion of my life, I couldn't imagine how sounds were made in the first place. Like I said, I thought guitar playing was going to be easy. When I said, I'm going to do that, I want to learn how to play guitar. And it's not.
And you know
so,
the fucked up part too about it is that Eddie Van Halen couldn't even read sheet music.
yeah, he's just one of those dudes who
really
isn't that crazy?
Yeah, if he had any kind of training, he wouldn't have just noodled and figured out how to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Which is why it's like, thankfully, there's that, those untrained people who, like him, who just figure it out through trial and error. And I feel like that's kind of a bygone era because, I mean, geez, you can learn how to do anything now via YouTube or online school or whatever it is. So I feel like that era is kind of gone. The idea that you're completely self-taught is, well, okay, maybe you learned how to do it without sitting one-on-one with a teacher, but like you at least watch how to play, solos on YouTube or something like that. There are millions of guys who have channels devoted to guitar lessons. So I feel like that self-taught era is kind of over, and now everybody's going to be copying everybody else. That's not a negative. I feel like now just technology's gotten us to the point where there's so many things to help you along, whereas back then he was probably just like dicking around, and that's how he figured out, like, oh, if I touch the neck here, it makes this sound, and if I just use my fingers, it'll sound like this. So he did the hard work for the rest of us. But Jimmy, so how about you? What was your first awareness of Van Halen? First song you heard? Whatever.
It's a very particular moment that I remember. It was when our family got the Gateway computer back in like the 90s, and it came with these discs like encyclopedia and stuff like that. And they had one disc dedicated to like history of music up to that point. And they had like Pointer Sisters on there. They had some Prince. They had some other things on there. But then they had the same song by two different artists. You Really Got Me. So they had the Kinks version. I'm like, oh, this sounds cool. This is a nice one. Like me and my brother, we weren't listening to much radio. We were just listening to whatever we kind of had at hand. And so we listened to that. And then they had the Van Halen version of it. And my eyes were like, whoa.
It's better.
Yeah, what is this?
Whoa, this sounds amazing. And it was almost within, I don't know, like the next year or something like that. They also had not the Crystal Pepsi commercial, but another one. And it had another Van Halen song on it. I can't remember offhand, but it had like a Barbie doll riding in a Mustang or something like that. And that was my second song that I heard by Van Halen. I can't remember the commercial perfectly, but I just remember that moment. And I'm just like, these guys are great. I love these guys. They're amazing. And that was kind of like why I was the David Lee Roth guy, because I listened to their earlier stuff. I never really listened to any Hagar until I met you guys, and you guys played songs for me. And to be honest, I haven't. None of the songs have been a miss. So I could be a Hagar fan if I listened to some more, but I've never gone out of my way to listen to the later albums.
Right. Well, you could appreciate both. You're one of those fans who, frankly, I can respect, because since I grew up in the Sammy Hagar era, and we all essentially did, just from when we were born, he was in our knowledge of our awareness of music and what was on the radio, or what was on MTV or VH1 in our case too, was Sammy was the singer for Van Halen until '96. So for us, that kind of is our era. So the fact that people can go back and say, oh, both eras are great, and the fact that, Jimmy, you can say that, I do have respect for that. I just can't, for all the silly reasons, Ryan and I were kind of rattling off, like I just kind of can't get behind the Roth era in hindsight. But had we grown up with it, I think we would have been into it, of course, if we were born 10 years earlier.
And I totally get the hate, and I think it's hilarious. Like, you're not making fun of me, you're just making fun of David Lee Roth. So
the albums are just structured differently. I mean, Sammy's albums are just like hit after hit, song after song, and then there's a couple tracks on the Dave albums that are like them just fucking around for a minute, and it became a song. So it's
right.
Like they had a separate track, intro, outro, everything else. Like there's a whole before Pretty Woman on Dive Her Down. There's a whole other track before that of Eddie just playing, which is great. But they were just like party albums. They weren't like, and when Sammy had his albums, they were just like song after song after song after, like it was a full album, so to say. Yeah,
it wasn't just about a couple of singles and then a bunch of filler. Like
they cranked out in the Roth era. They cranked out the first 6 albums in 6 years. Every year, with the exception of '83, there was an album that came out. So they were just putting them out. So if whatever was coming out, they were just going to fuck it. It's good enough for the record, and that's it.
Well, that's the funny thing too, because those Roth era albums, as much as people are just like, well, they made more albums with Roth, and they sold more, blah, 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 but they're littered with covers. I mean, You Really Got Me. Mm-hmm. They did You're No Good on the second album. Dive Her Down is at least half covers.
Yeah.
Pretty Woman, and that horrendous version of Dancing in the Street, which is, was in a race to the bottom with the Bowie and Jagger version, Good God. what a sad time. Like, as much as we love the music of the 80s, goddamn, what a horrible, like, again, Race to the Bottom. That's the best way I could say, because those versions
I think the Bowie
horrendous.
Jagger one puts it over because of that horrendous video.
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, it was so bad.
Yeah.
It was so
like,
bad.
Like, were you high? What were you doing? were you like...
Probably high, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It was cocaine, and no one's going to say no to these guys, because they're legends.
He looks like a chick. I'm going to do it. No, don't, David, don't.
They'll be swinging, swaying. Anyway.
I think Mick Jagger probably thought it looked like Annie Lennox, so that's why he probably didn't.
All right. Well, if you believe the rumors, then maybe they decided to do it, during Pillow Talk. But anyway.
I don't know those rumors. You can't move on from that.
All right. Well,
I don't know what the rumor is.
That's a whole other show then. So never mind. We're going to put that to the side.
All right.
But actually, I think you really got me. I kind of remembered as Jimmy's saying it, like the Barbie doll or something. I think you really got me was a song in that commercial, because I think it was like a freshman in high school when that commercial. I forget what it was for, but I think you really got me was the one in that commercial. Yeah, it was like a Barbie and like a Corvette, and there was some other. Right. I mean, it was like a generic Barbie and like a generic GI Joe or something like that. And it was, I mean, it was for Schweppes or something. I don't remember, but I think it was like a soda commercial. Yeah, very on brand for ginger ale. It's like, you know what?
Ken's gonna be pissed.
It was probably Pepsi or Coke, one of those two.
Oh, well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, probably not ginger ale. You know what says party rock? Ginger ale.
Ginger.
But Crystal Pepsi, yeah, I mean, that cannot be understated. Going back to what Ryan said about the Crystal Pepsi ads for right now, it's like,
it was
that
all
was
over the
all
place.
over. Yeah. And I don't even know if I knew that was Van Halen at the time either, because I was 91. So, yeah,
right. I'm not sure if I really knew it was them. I just remember the song being played all over the place, and
totally,
especially on the commercial.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. That's that summer. The commercial was on constantly, and Crystal Pepsi was just it.
Yeah.
But all right, Jack, over to you. So your awareness of Van Halen came about.
Same way, pretty much with Jump. But actually, I just remembered when you just mentioned the Crystal Pepsi commercial, not really knowing who the band was or where that song was from. The Power Rangers movie in 1995, the end of the movie, they played the song Dreams. And I'm like, oh, it's a really good song.
Oh, yeah.
Until I got the Greatest Hits album, I'm like, that's Van Halen? Wait, they did a Power Rangers movie? And I was like, wait a minute. And I had to research, like, no, that came out a decade before the movie came out. But it was like, wow, that's so weird.
Right.
Yeah, the song's so great. The movie's trash.
Oh, yeah.
So random.
That was a weird...
that soundtrack was loaded with different... Like, it was crazy. They must have just licensed a bunch of people for that soundtrack.
Well, I think they took a page out of the soundtrack for Twister's book, and they're like, we'll get one good song by Van Halen, and the rest of the soundtrack's just going to be shitty.
Yeah, I don't remember like really anything else that was on that soundtrack except for Humans Being and that instrumental that he and Alex did.
Yeah,
for the
Respect the Wind,
that's
or something
it.
like that.
I was trying to think. I was like something about the wind, and it was like.
And I had that soundtrack because I was hearing, Humans Being all over the place too,
right.
And I was like, oh, this song is great. So I bought the soundtrack when I was, buying CDs. Remember that? And then I heard that song, that instrumental song was really, really good too.
Well, I can imagine a young Ryan being very disappointed that it wasn't just about farts. It was like Respect the Wind. It's Eddie and Alex farting into a microphone.
Yeah, respect this.
3.5 minutes. Which
but
I would have bought it actually.
Like as an era, if you're going to look at the Sammy versus the Roth era, as far as Eddie's playing is concerned. For me, it was definitely more buck wild when Roth was the front man. Like I feel like when Sammy joined the band, his playing was more sort of reserved and more technical and more sort of calculated, but it wasn't
the whole band.
No less good.
Yeah.
So that's not what I'm saying at all. It was just not as just like insane and unrestrained as it was
totally
when Roth was.
Well, I'm sure when you have
it was different kind of playing.
Yeah, when you have a frontman like David Lee Roth who's going to just be like, oh, I don't care, play whatever. And then you got Sammy who's like, no, here's how it should go. Like structure, you can tell because, like I said earlier in the show, I like David Lee Roth better just because that's what I envisioned Van Halen was. And then Sammy was the guy who just took over. And they had a couple good songs. I liked Sammy's singles because I bought the Greatest Hits album in 2002.
Right.
And I liked the singles, but I bought the Roth albums first because I thought, okay, that's what the definitive... What was being projected to me on television through documentaries or whatever was like this David Lee Roth's the real Van Halen. So I just always had that perception. And I had the singles for Sammy on the Greatest Hits. So I was good on both Greatest Hits Volume 1 and then Best of Both Worlds. So I was like, I'm good. I don't need the Sammy albums, but David Lee Roth is the whole original era. But when you guys showed me that, it was oh shit, this is better because it's a well-produced package, and not in a manufactured way. It's like this is a cohesive band now, as opposed to the past 6 albums that was just erratic all over the place. Like, come on, Dave, give me a break. In all those. No, seriously, there's a couple
You're right
in there where they're just fucking around and it's recorded and it's a song.
Yeah.
And even when I was listening to them back in like high school, learning about them, I was like, I don't know how that got onto an album. Like I never heard that before. As I was like getting into bands like Def Leppard and Cheap Trick and Rush, it was like that. Those albums were like, this is different because your guys just seem like they're fucking around a little bit. But there's just a couple songs chalked in, so it works.
Totally. Well, I think some of it is, I mean, number one, Eddie's playing was so pyrotechnic. There were a lot of guitar pyrotechnics going on in those early albums. And it was also like being in your 20s, and it was more, party music and everything, which I'm sure was heavily influenced by the fact that David Lee Roth was very, very much about that kind of music. And, by all accounts, was kind of essentially leading the band or pointing them in the direction that they were going in. And as far as what, Sammy's account and saying those guys did not know what direction to go in, Roth kind of called the shots in that band. And then when he left, they were kind of rudderless, which, makes sense. That's I've read 100 band biographies and seen, 100 more documentaries. And yeah, there kind of is usually one person. It's very rarely a complete democracy where everybody kind of has an equal say in everything. Everybody gets their say or has an opinion, but usually it's one person kind of guiding the arc of the band's trajectory. But I feel like at the point, like Eddie was, his playing wasn't as just crazy. Part of it was probably getting older because he would have been about, it would have been about 30 at that point. So maybe slowing down, and not in a bad way, but just I've been doing all this now for a decade, and I want to do something different. But you could tell that even before Roth left, which is why I get so pissed off when people get mad at Sammy for, there's keyboards in the band, or the songs got softer. It's listen to Jump, which is all keyboards. Everybody knows the keyboard. Yeah, except for an 8-bar guitar solo.
I'll Wait, it's even more egregious.
I'll Wait is, that synth, which is Eddie. And the track 1984 is an instrumental keyboard thing. Like, Eddie was going in that direction anyway.
Right.
And maybe Roth wasn't down for it, and that's fine. When you look at his first 2 solo albums, which I only own because of Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan played on them, not because the songs are so great. I'm fans of those guys. But it's like they were kind of going in that direction anyway. So Eddie was going away.
And he sings in them, and they don't sound that good anymore. So.
That's true. Yeah.
No, seriously, a lot of them are very much like, "Oh, this sounds amazing," but they're like,
You're right.
Yeah. At the same time, like synths were almost unavoidable in hard rock in the 80s.
Every
many
genre
rock bands used them. But Eddie did a lot of really cool stuff with them. He made guitar sounds with them, and he put distortion on things. And like if you look at Why Can't This Be Love, I was watching a live video of them playing it the other day, and he's making what sounds like a distortion guitar pedal noise on this synth, and I'm like, this is awesome. Like, it sounds, if you didn't know any better, you'd think that this was the guitar. Like, Sammy's playing and then he's doing this sound on the keyboard, and it's like, that sounds like another guitar playing, but it's not.
Right.
Like, he was inventive with it, at least, you know?
Well, that's it. He was just a creative dude altogether. And that, I feel like that kind of speaks for itself. And not so much that, according to Sammy's book, he's the only one we've gotten a book from. David Lee Roth wrote a book in like 94 or something, but I don't even think it's in print anymore. And who wants to read that? Except Jimmy. I'm kidding. But anyway, even Jimmy's like, no, I'll pass. No,
don't care.
But that was, and I still listen to those chapters of the audiobook almost every summer, because I just remember Jack and Ryan and I spent like a day driving around because I had the audiobook, and we're just listening to those like 5-6 Van Halen chapters because we were just fascinated. And I was anyway by that era. I feel like that there's more we need more books from people who are around that era, just as a working musician, and because that kind of arena rock era is a bygone era at this point. And I want to hear more about that, because historically it was a time and place in music where there were these big shows and big tours, and you don't see that as much anymore. You kind of do. There's always like a package tour or 2 or 3 smaller package tours, but like when all these big bands would go out and do these big tours
in their heyday,
that was exactly. Like that was an era that I would love to learn more about, that and the working musician element of it, which is why Steve Lukather's book is amazing. But
well, that was mind blowing. That I believe it was '88 where they went out with Metallica and a couple other like really big bands. Where there's,
Metallica,
like,
Ryan's second favorite band, Dokken. They went out with
fucking Stan Dokken.
And who else? Kingdom Come, who were terrible. And what was it? There was another one, or maybe that was it. Maybe it was the four of them. But yeah, the Monsters of Rock tour, which is actually a documentary. I was cruising through YouTube. Somebody uploaded a documentary like 2 years ago. I don't know if it was MTV or what, about Monsters of Rock. And speaking of which, MTV Classic put something up the other day in honor of Eddie, which I shared with Ryan and Jack in our chat. And it's funny, you talk about the evolution that kind of Eddie was going through musically, and that he was kind of more focused on keyboard. It was, oh God, who's the guy? It wasn't Kurt Loder. Who's the other guy who did MTV News? Now I'm drawing a blank on, I think his name was Chris something. I'm totally blanking on his name. But anyway, there's a video, and it's worth looking up. It was a tour of Eddie's 5150 studio in 98. It was right around the time Van Halen 3 came out. And he's showing this vast tape archive, like where all this stuff was kind of cataloged. And he said that they found this one tape, which was from 1983, and it was that piano part from Right Now. So Eddie was already writing that stuff when Roth was in the band, and maybe he just rejected it and just wasn't down for it. But obviously, he was going in a certain direction. So, again, I just feel like Sammy gets a lot of blame for that from people, which is stupid. Maybe not so much anymore. So I feel like in hindsight, or as time has gone on, we've seen, obviously, who the harder working guy is, and who's the one who's still touring regularly and is active in any kind of way, which is, it kind of deflates the Van Halen argument about Sammy's work ethic sucked, and that's why he wasn't in the band anymore.
Yeah.
Circa
it was kind of like the
96
perfect marriage if you think about it. Like if he was working on this stuff when he was with Roth, probably not at the time thinking of like splitting off from him or whatever, but just putting a creative outlet to like, I got to put this on tape and everything else. And like you said, it was probably just like, hey man, don't worry about that. We're gonna go, get some hookers, and I'm gonna get some new spandex. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's got to be it had to be frustrating at that point to be like, yes, we're the biggest band in the world, or one of the biggest bands, but we're literally just with a guy who wants to party and have a good time and doesn't care what we record because it's, he thinks he has the Midas touch, so to say. It's all good.
Totally.
So when Sammy comes along, it's like, oh shit, I could put all this to good use.
And and write songs and not do a shitload of covers. I mean, even at the point when David Lee Roth first kind of went solo, what did he cover? California Girls and Just a Gigolo. He did two covers when he on his way out of the band. So there you go. I mean, to me, and again, that stuff to me is just like, and I'm not doing it to further justify my opinion that I like Sammy better, because it's just my opinion and it's all subjective. But when you look at that and you just think, well, yeah, did that guy have a lot going on, or did he just have to cop stuff from everyone else? Because, again, there's covers on every single Van Halen. And yeah, the instrumental bits, like, I mean, geez, Dive Her Down, everything that wasn't a cover, I think, was an instrumental bit. Like there was that, I think it's called Intruder, that track that is before Pretty Woman.
Yes.
Little guitars, Cathedral, there's all these little instrumental bits that Eddie was obviously working on. And maybe it was even a situation where, like Sammy said, for the Balance record, the reason there were, I think, 3 instrumentals on there was he didn't want to write lyrics for them. So maybe Roth just heard those and said, I'm not writing to that. Those are stupid. Or maybe they wanted to give Eddie a solo spot. Which is something funny, which I remember from. I'm sorry, Jimmy. You go ahead, because I'm definitely gonna take another direction.
A lot of artists do that. They put up they fiddle around with their instruments. They put in that like little pieces that they put together, and sometimes they just can't find the right song to put it into, so they hold on to it and they try to figure out like parts of it to play into songs. I'm using Dream Theater here as my example because I'm a big fan.
Totally.
And like Jordan Rudess, the keyboardist, he always is playing, always. Like he has so much content. And he just finally made a solo album. But that's probably what Eddie was doing. He probably had all this stuff set aside. He's waiting for the right Van Halen song to put it into. And with David Lee Roth, you don't have the right energy. It doesn't. Yeah. It's not going to fit in any of those songs. So it was probably when Hagar came around, he's like, oh yeah, we're slowing it down. This is where I want to use it. This is going to work perfectly.
Oh,
so I
feel
like you got to find the right song for the material, and I'm glad Eddie was patient with it. He waited to get those right songs.
Yeah.
So,
and you could see too that there were. I mean, you could name a handful of songs on 5150 that could have been David Lee Roth era songs. Listening to the music, you're like, okay, you hear him doing something over Good Enough. Maybe Summer Nights, even though it was kind of a slower tempo. There are definitely some of those songs you could say, okay, maybe there were the beginnings of those. Maybe those were songs that maybe Roth had rejected, or at least they wrote them when he was still in the band. And, they were able to jump to another level. But like Dreams, that would have never happened if David Lee Roth's in the band, because he can't sing that high.
Nope.
I mean, Sammy never sung that high before that song either. But I feel like that can't be understated, that through an evolution, the evolution of a band, short of, tragedy, like let's say AC/DC, but bands evolve and they do go in a lot of directions. It's very rare that a band will stay the same. Like, AC/DC changed singers and still stayed the same.
And even as much
that's rare.
We love Sammy. On the Best of Both Worlds album, there's a couple covers he has at the end of Panama, Jump, and he does a couple of Roth songs, and they're not that good. It's not like he couldn't even make them sound good either.
Well, because they're bad. I mean, the lyrics to Jump are so stupid.
Yeah,
that can't be understated. The lyrics to Jump, it's just a dumb song. Can you see me standing here? I got my back against the record machine. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I mean,
which is a shame because musically, it's incredibly fun. Like, from the lyrics.
Oh, even the videos. I will give credit. When I was a kid, and particularly when VH1, they weren't in regular rotation on VH1 at that point because Sammy was in the band. But during the summer, I don't know if you guys remember, it was right around July 4th. They would do VH1 would do music videos A to Z, from ABBA to ZZ Top, and I remember seeing the block of Van Halen videos, which I think was the first time I saw Finish What You Started. I didn't even know that was a single. I just known it from the live album. But they would play Hot for Teacher and, Jumpin' Panama. I mean, they would play those on occasion, but like I never seen the Hot for Teacher video at that point. And I thought,
Pretty Woman
these were
is
fun.
The worst video I've ever seen.
Yeah.
My God. It was like, what? Who's doing what?
David Lee Roth. I mean, according to, how things
look it up on YouTube. It's atrocious. It doesn't even make sense. And it's early day music video, so it's not even it's not like that's an excuse. It's dog shit.
Yeah.
It's like a costume party. Yeah. I don't know what's happening.
I don't think a lot of 80s music videos made a lot of sense, to be honest.
Well, that's true. In the nascent days of music videos, then a lot of them were probably. I'm sure there are a lot of lame ones got buried.
Genesis ones? Any Genesis music videos?
Yeah,
well,
they were pretty cheesy.
Creepy.
Yeah, not everyone could be Peter Gabriel in the 80s, where you make a super inventive video where it looks great and it's actually something to behold. Like, wow, this is
Sledgehammer,
this is visually stunning.
Land of Confusion's creepy as shit.
Yeah, it is. I love it, though.
Yeah, I do, too. Only made more creepy by the fact that Disturbed covered it, but that's another show.
Well,
but I digress.
Yeah, which happens a lot. But it's funny, too, Eddie kind of also came out of the gate, lest we forget, with Eruption, which on the first album, which is pretty, was mind-blowing to everybody. And when you talk to guitar players from that era, I was lucky enough, and I should have pulled the audio. I'm kind of sorry I didn't. But I had a 101 guitar lesson with Paul Gilbert when I was at Musicians Institute. And I don't remember how we started talking about it, but he was talking about guitar solos and how prior to Van Halen, guitar solos sounded like Heartbreaker by Led Zeppelin. Kind of these tasteful solos, kind of blues-oriented, so with the exception of Hendrix, who was just kind of a different animal. But there was no showiness. There weren't like pyrotechnics, which is, one of I think the best ways to sum up kind of Van Halen, that early Van Halen style playing, the flashy kind of guitar playing. And he said, you listen to solo of Heartbreaker, which is now and he said, then you hear something like Eruption, and he described it as like notes falling from the sky. It was just like, how is somebody making this sound on a guitar? And it's true. And actually, there was someone, this is years ago, so long before my I was single at the time, not that there's anything I need to put a precursor up for, but I remember there was one female friend of mine who had never heard Eruption, and I had said, like, I never learned how to play this on guitar. I should probably sit and like learn this because everybody seems to know it. This prior going to a Musicians Institute and everything, but I said I should probably figure this out. And she said, "Oh God, if you could play this, like I would have to have sex with you immediately." And that's when I was like, "Really?" Like it wasn't so what I had interested, but it's just the notion of which, being a teenager flush with hormones and learning how to play guitar anyway, the thought crosses your mind, but then all of a sudden it becomes reality. Like, really? You would
more motivation.
Yeah.
I can't tell you. Listen, I did. My parents were very. Very, I don't even know the word. Not permissive, but I think we're realistic enough where, when I was 8, I watched Beverly Hills Cop with them, which is by no means a kid's movie because there's violence and titties. And but they at the same time they knew like, okay, they're watching it at home. They weren't so oblivious to think like he's never going to watch something like this. So they did. And same thing for my 16th birthday. I remember them saying, "What do you want?" I said, "Playboy." And they got me a subscription to Playboy. And that's right around the time because I started playing guitar. I literally got my first.
You're my goddamn hero.
My first guitar I got 2 weeks before my 16th birthday. And so that kind of coincided. Getting the Playboy subscription and the guitar playing kind of came about at the same time. And that was a huge motivation, man. Every time that new issue showed up every month, I would go down into the basement and, until not literally till my fingers bled, figuratively till my fingers bled.
Rub one out until your fingers bled.
Well, no, because then I never get any practicing done. No, it was a huge motivator for sure, just to be like, oh man, I get play. Because at that point you had the stories of, the Motley Crues and, all those other bands where it's like they all married and then divorced playmates, but they still had them, so there was that idea. So there was that connection, that flashy, kind of guitar playing, which did, I guess, is the idea of being impressive. I don't know. I'm not a woman. And I'm not like, I'm not going to fuck any dudes just because they can play guitar really well. I like it. I've met a lot.
So what
of them.
happened? Did you ever play Eruption for that girl?
No, I didn't. And we never slept together, by the way. We were friends, but it just put the idea in my head, not as if it was there on some level, without a doubt, but just the idea of like, wow, if I learn how to play really, if I'm a flashy guitar player, hey, maybe that'll translate into something vis-a-vis sex. But it was just weird kind of having that thought and like, yeah, I guess so. But I hadn't really thought of it prior to that, except for, again, I'm telling you, when that Playboy showed up every month, I was just like, oh, I'm going to practice my ass off. I'm going to get a band together that's going to crumble in a couple of weeks, but damn it.
We're going to get one good single, man.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. And I hopefully will be able to ride out the rest of my life on it. And as we all know, that didn't happen. Here I am stuck doing a show online for free. But anyway, not a guitar in sight. Well, they're out of frame, but regardless.
Yep.
There's, as far as Eddie, we kind of didn't want to do the typical thing that everybody's been doing all over social media. And even people who aren't into Van Halen, they're like, the guy changed, the way guitar playing was forever. And, Eddie's a legend and an innovator. And yeah, we all know that stuff. Everybody's known that stuff forever.
He's the greatest guitar player ever, as far as any of us are concerned, probably. So as far as I'm concerned,
he's definitely one of the most influential.
I would agree.
Hands down. Like if you're talking about, if you had to make a top five, just rock guitar players. Because if you get into the blues and jazz guys who predate the rock guys, that's a bigger conversation. But like rock guitar players, yeah, there's Clapton, Eddie Van Halen, Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page. Because a lot of people started playing guitar after hearing Led Zeppelin. You can't, minimize that.
Right.
The Beatles were more songs than guitar playing. People wanted to play guitar because they wanted to, be in a band. But like when it came to wanting to play lead guitar, yeah, there's a handful of guys you can boil it down to in the 60s and 70s.
I'd put Alex Lifeson up there.
I would too, but for music geeks, not on a grand scale, because Rush was they never had like that mainstream audience. I agree. I love Alex Lifeson's guitar playing. It's one of those things where, there's still articles written about like how to play those crazy, those chord intervals that he plays. He
did it all. He
did. Yeah. Well, that's it. And trios are a whole other thing.
I'd say Slash also might be a good one.
Slash, yeah, to a degree, but more as an image than I think as a guitar player. I feel like Slash's image, and I'm not demeaning his guitar playing. I just feel like you could point to a couple of songs, but just kind of, because they're Guns N' Roses songs, because they're songs everybody knows, like November Rain and Sweet Child of Mine and Welcome to the Jungle. As far as guys, like I want to play like Slash. I never heard that as much as I heard about like I want to play like Clapton or Eddie Van Halen.
Okay,
but not in a bad way. Yeah. Look, Slash has an image and he's done well by it, so I'm not putting Slash down at all. But yeah, there's definitely a couple of guys, and Eddie's one of those dudes for sure. Frankly, I was actually thinking about this today, and not so much as a point like what am I going to talk about on the show, but just the idea of I just turned 39 last week, the day after Eddie died, and the last album with Sammy, Balance, came out in 95, and Eddie would have been 40. In the last 25 years of his life, he did 2 albums. That's really, really sad, because there's the point that I've thought about and talked about when it comes to just my creative ambitions, where there are a lot of people you can point to in their careers overall, in entertainment, which, while not important in the grand scheme of things, and I know I'm pretty sure I talked about this on the show recently, been having this conversation with a lot of people like, so what are you up to? Because I have a few irons in the fire. But the idea that a lot of people in their careers, just because we know entertainment figures, are more public, so that's why I can point to them. But whether you're talking about actors or musicians or whatever, will either have a great first half and a not so great second half, or they pop in their second half. Like the easy examples, like Sam Jackson, who was in his 40s, like when he popped huge, and has been in everything for the last 30 years since. Whereas when you think about Eddie Van Halen, it's like, wow, literally like the first, I mean, granted, he lived to be 65, so it's not, half, an even half of his life. But when you think about it, like, wow, all of the stuff he did was really up into when he was 40, and then not a lot in the last 25 years. And I realize, like, the music career and the band isn't necessarily everything, but you just think, wow, he did 2 albums, not particularly well received, weren't big hits. Like, his peak was up until he was 40. And then these last 25 years, not a lot. And I just thought, wow, that's really sad, because that band was such a mystery. It's a band people always want to know what's going on with Van Halen. Is Van Halen going to be touring again? Who's going to be the singer on the next tour? Are they making another album? I mean, speaking of my time at Musicians Institute, one of my teachers I remember was just apoplectic when Warner Brothers dropped Van Halen, which I think was around 2006. Because at that point, they hadn't done an album in 8 years since Van Halen 3 came out. And Warner Brothers dropped them, and then fast forward when Different Kind of Truth came out in 2012, they were on, I believe it was Interscope. But this teacher was he was just crazed about it. He's like, how is it Seal still has a record deal and Van Halen doesn't have a record deal? Because Seal, because Seal was on Warner Brothers. Well, yeah, but Seal was on Warner Brothers records as well. But he at least put out a record every 2 to 3 years, whereas Van Halen's done nothing for 8 years. They did a reunion tour in 2004 and just had nothing on the docket.
Which I was so excited about, because the night I graduated high school, they were playing the Garden. And I was in New York for the project graduation trip. It's like, man, I'd rather fucking be in New York right now, at the Garden right now, seeing that, than on a boat with these people I'm not going to see anymore. So
I was excited about that tour when I first heard about it, but then my reluctance got the best of me. I actually said to myself, you know what? I don't trust this, because you'd always heard the rumors about Eddie Van Halen drinking and about the difficulty. And I thought, like, there was so much back and forth in the press between Van Halen and Sammy that I said, I just don't know if this tour is even going to finish. And it almost didn't, according to, Sammy's stories in his book. He wanted to pull out. And if it wasn't for the financial obligations, and the money he would have had to pay out for quitting the tour, it wouldn't have finished if he could have gotten out of it.
Right, and you can devote a lot of Eddie's second half troubles to obviously the drug addiction and the alcohol and cancer on and off. So that explains a lot as to why he didn't do nearly as much in his second half of life as he did in his first. He had a lot going on. That he had a lot of demons.
Well, it was also, unfortunately, for a band who was so prolific in both eras, that did so much good music, and it's had a string of #1 albums with Sammy specifically. So in their most recent era, and then 3 was not too well received, and that tour didn't go well and everything, playing half-empty arenas and things like that. As much as that tour deserves praise for being the only representation of every era of the band, and that they played Roth and Sammy songs, and obviously the Gary Cherone songs from the new album. So in a way, that tour kind of stands alone, even though it's not successful. It was the kind of best representation of all eras of the band. But
right.
At the same time, it's kind of a shame that for a band that was so prolific, all they did after that was kind of reunion tours. They didn't really do anything new. They did some not great songs with Sammy for that Best of Both Worlds compilation when the reunion tour happened in 2004, which I actually listened back to because I said, well, maybe I was too hard on these songs. No, those songs are pretty lousy.
Yeah.
Considering how good the songs with Sammy, those 4 albums were, I listened to it and said, no, it's probably the best they could do at the time and under the circumstances, but they don't stand out as much as the songs from those albums do. But it's, I don't know. I just thought it was sad that every tour was, looking back when they reunited and did the tour with Roth in 2007. It was, just a greatest hits tour of those 6 albums. And when they did the tours with him in, for a Different Kind of Truth, okay, they had some new songs, and they did their last tour in 2015. And I remember talking about it at the time. Sherry and I talked about it on the show when the live album came out. And we're just like, this sucks. He can't sing. He's like kind of half talking the words, which is kind of David Lee Roth style anyway. And we just said, this is not good. He can't sing. I was actually very brutal about that. We devoted a whole hour to talk about how much better Sammy was than David Lee Roth.
Did he issue a statement, David Lee Roth? I didn't see anything.
He just put out a tweet with a picture of he and Eddie from, I guess, a recent tour, because they were definitely older. And it said, what a crazy ride it's been or something.
No.
Which, I mean, I don't imagine the guy has a lot of depth as far as that goes. Just so I'm not really surprised. I wouldn't have expected some heartfelt tribute to Eddie. I mean, it's one of the things I was very interested in. Sammy Hagar doing his birthday bash this year as a pay-per-view special, which is later this week, I think. I know his birthday's tomorrow, so maybe it is tomorrow. But I was very interested in that anyway, because I was like, oh, for $20 we can watch Sammy's concert. That'll be cool. We can't go to a concert for a while, so at least we could see a new concert, which they shot on, I think, Friday and Saturday. And hearing about Eddie's death, I was saying to Sherry, wow, these guys, Sammy and Michael Anthony they're just going to empty the tank for this show. Like, it's going to be amazing because they're going to play the fuck out of those Van Halen songs, because I can't imagine what anybody's going through. I mean, Sammy did respond to Howard Stern, who had reached out to him and said, do you want to say anything, on the show tomorrow? Because they were live on the air the day after Eddie passed away. And Sammy didn't want to do any interviews with anybody, but he did actually write a letter about they'd been in touch since the beginning of the year. I believe it was something like January. Everybody go check. You can look up that clip on YouTube. They did put out a nice clip of different tributes to Eddie during that show. It's a nice 7-8 minute clip. But Howard reads this letter from Sammy saying that they were in touch kind of through text, and he didn't hear anything from Eddie within the last month, so he knew things were bad. But he said they were. He called it a love fest. So at least they were able to reconcile, which is good, because Sammy's publicly been trying to reconcile and at least be friends with
for
the band,
years.
Even if they're not, these last couple of years. So
and they were such good friends when they were in the band together. And you read about it in Sammy's book, and it's so sad the way things ended up. They loved each other. Even though we don't know them, it was heartbreaking to even hear about how their friendship crumbled, and how this great era of this band ended. And I'm glad that they were able to reconcile at the end, but it just sucks. They could have done so much more,
to think about what could have been.
Oh yeah. That's it. It's such a drag just to think man, this is the end of the Van Halen story, with Eddie being gone. And again, it's sad to see, because for a band that always played everything close to the chest and never really put out public statements with regard to anything, very, very hush-hush about whatever they were doing, because there were so many aborted attempts with David Lee Roth, and even with, last summer they were supposed to do a tour with Roth.
Look at 1996.
With Michael Anthony.
When they went out in the VMAs, and then 2 days later it was over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
and
that's
those awful overalls.
Oh my God. Well, that was it, and that was the thing. David Lee Roth apparently was making it about himself, backstage. He wanted to answer all the questions.
I still remember that interview where he said that to Eddie Van Halen. He's like, "Tonight's about me." I still remember how taken aback Eddie was, and he was like, "Don't you ever talk to me like that again?"
Because Eddie had hip problems at that point, and eventually had to have surgery on his hip. But it was, how's your hip doing? And Roth said to him, "Yeah, tonight's about me, not your fucking hip." It's whoa, it's not about you, dude. Just because all of a sudden you're on MTV for the first time in who knows how many years, you gotta, but that's David Lee Roth, and that's that's what you get when dealing with a personality like that. And in a band, I couldn't imagine having to deal with. I had enough trouble dealing with just regular schmoes in bands. I couldn't imagine dealing with an ego like that. I mean, that's got to be, and I, I don't know, but it's just a shame to see that band just. I mean, again, they did 2 albums in the last 25 years, kind of forgettable, which is a shame, but everything was just, greatest hits tours, which, listen, still does big business. There are plenty of bands who don't even have that many original members, whether it's Kiss or Foreigner or, a lot of bands where there's only a handful, 1 or 2 maybe, original members. Lynyrd Skynyrd's another example. It's kind of a rotation, Allman Brothers. But it's just a shame that for a band who was so huge and so influential that their story just kind of ends with no... they didn't have a chance to go out. And
goodbye.
I mean, you would hope they would play. I mean, I know Rush didn't want to play the farewell card, and I understood that. I'm grateful to have seen them at their very last show ever. And with the death of Neil Peart, it made me appreciate, wow, I was actually there for their last time on stage together. That's really awesome. But the fact that Van Halen didn't get that it's just been nothing for the last 5 years, even though they tried to get that tour going last year with Michael Anthony, that apparently fell apart. Who knows why? It's just a shame for that band, a band that big, to just have the story end like this without a big celebration, without a chance for them to do even if it's a victory lap tour, that would have been great. And if they gotten to do the tour last summer, with the original 4 guys, awesome. Then I would, even though I wouldn't have gone because I don't care about that era of the band, I'm still just, I would have been happy that they at least had that to say, yeah, they could do it. But apparently we don't know specifically, but that's in part due to.
And also you could think about it that way, but there could also been the relationship was so volatile for years and years. It could have fallen apart again, and that could have been the legacy, the end of it there.
True.
Everything between Roth and Van Halen brothers was so volatile for years and years. Who knows?
No, you're right. They couldn't get along.
But still a goodbye of some sort. Like, you want the high note, but even if they try for the high note, my point is they might not have gotten that. It could have been another. Well, the saga continues with the
Yeah, well, that's it. There's a lot of drama surrounding a band like that, and that's why you would hope at their. And
I hate that I don't want that. I don't think of that as their legacy, but like it sucks that's part of it, though.
You can't discount it. You can't look at it as like, well, that's not part of it, because you have to look at, again, the last 25 years and just being at an age where, like I said, I looked at myself and just thought, like, well, imagine if the best stuff I did is behind me, and like the next 25 years, I didn't do any. Like, that would be like me going back and just releasing like Only Podcast That Matters greatest hits episodes or something, putting together like compilations, be like, remember this cool thing I did once upon a time when I was younger, and that would just be a shame to think like, well, the best stuff I did, like, it's done already, as opposed to having things to look forward to. And yeah, there are obviously health issues and egos and a lot of other things that get in the way. But like I said, for a band that big to not be able to make it work, it's not like they had to drive around the country and tour, but they had to share a Prius together. Everybody could get their own transportation, their own hotel rooms. I mean, they were at a level where you think they could have made it work with Sammy or with Roth, because you couldn't have brought in somebody new. That wouldn't have happened. No. I mean, I would love to see Michael Starr from Steel Panther be this. I'd go see Van Halen with him fronting the band. Absolutely. But
I'd see that.
I would too. And like, even do the David Lee Roth songs, 'cause at least you got a dude with some singing chops who can handle it.
Yeah.
As opposed to Roth, who just does like marching band moves and kind of sings his way through it.
Yeah.
I mean, I made my cousin laugh the other day because he's not my cousin Pete, who plays in Trombone Shorty, who was on the show a little while back, and he said, Van Halen was never so much my thing, but he's like, man, it's hard to deny, as somebody who wasn't into him, how much of an influence he's had on my playing and everything. Just like, like say Chuck Berry or dudes like that. There's another influential guitar player in terms of rock, but how much of it has just seeped its way into the people you do like. And I said, totally. I said I was always more of a fan of the era of Van Halen, which included Sammy, because but I said Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing those early records, just, you can't deny it. I mean, my joke has been for a long time, and he found it very funny, was it could have been on that first album. I mean, Regis Philbin could have been the singer. It still would have been huge because everyone would be listening to the guitar playing. But that's it's just sad to see that this is the way kind of the Van Halen story ends, and it's just a drag for a band that deserves better and could have done so much more. I mean, we're saying it from the outside. We're just saying it as fans. It's just a drag that this is kind of the conclusion of the story of that band, in that it's just like, well, when they do something, it's every couple of years, and it's just kind of a greatest hits tour, like, and a reunion tour. That's the other thing. Not active enough to not do anything that isn't let's say billed as a reunion of some sort. That's just a huge drag.
They might have to get their kids to fill in on the empty positions. Maybe that'll be our only hope for their introduction to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Maybe their kids will play a tribute, something like that.
Well, that's the funny thing. They got inducted in 2007, and the only members who showed up were Sammy Hagar and Michael Anthony.
They got to have some big, I don't know, finale to the band. There needs to be something like a documentary or something like that to finish it off.
Yeah, we need a documentary like the dudes who did the Rush documentary, do a Van Halen documentary. I would love that.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a big ass tribute concert somewhere after things return somewhat to normal.
Yes.
I mean, it may be in 2022. That's when the rescheduled Elton John date that I got Sherry tickets for last Christmas. That was supposed to happen in April.
And I believe that Sammy would be behind that too.
Oh, he would be there.
I want to believe that him and Michael Anthony would put that together somehow.
They would. I mean,
maybe that's the finale we get, and that's good enough for me as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, I wonder what they have planned for this live stream, because I bet it's good. I bet whatever it is they're doing for the show, I was in anyway, but I bet that this is going to be pretty sweet. Whatever it is they do, because I'm sure, if they shot it Friday and Saturday, they had a couple of days to maybe work out some stuff and say, okay, we got to do something really strong as a tribute to Eddie, because this is their first public anything. That's supposed to be a celebration. It's supposed to be Sammy's birthday. I think he's going to be 72. And you would think it would be just a big-ass celebration, but you can't minimize. I mean, he still says Van Halen was a tentpole of his career, and it's true. So we'll see. In summation, everybody kind of give your final thoughts. Let's start with Jimmy, who we've been shouting over this entire show. Jimmy, what do you have to say?
Don't worry about that. They are still that band where I can listen to the singles. They could be on the radio, and it's not a song I'm going to skip. Never. It really is. It doesn't matter what era of song it is. It's something that I could be playing on like a commercial, or I could have playing in the background, and it's just it's feel good music to me, no matter what we're listening to. Personalities, they can destroy a band, but the sound is everything to me. So yeah. I wish I could have heard more from Eddie, but I'm happy with what I've got.
Agreed. I concur. How about you, Jack?
Nice. They're one of the bands that changed that influenced me the way I like music nowadays. Them, Cheap Trick, Rush, Def Leppard they're the ones that are the core bands for me. And Van Halen changed so much for me. And then learning along the way with you guys too, it's interwoven in our friendship in a way that it's like a connecting bond between all of us somehow, some way. And it's timeless to me. I love Van Halen.
Ryan, your thoughts, please.
Yes, I'm a bigger fan of the Hagar era, but I also greatly appreciate everything that came before, especially with Eddie's playing and, just the wild instrumentation despite the dopey lyrics. But I mean, such fun songs, for the most part in that era, and then more of a cohesive band sound as Jack was talking about before, when Sammy joined the band. And I am still really bummed out that, we didn't get anything of note, after Balance, and everything just sort of fell apart, and there were blips on the radar for 20 years, and then that was it. And now Eddie's gone, and we're never really going to get anything substantial again, because he's irreplaceable, and it's just impossible. But definitely one of my favorite bands, and I'm glad we have the music that we do have.
Yeah, same for me. I'm very grateful to have this catalog of music, and that Eddie has the place he has, that there aren't people who they say, well, who did this better? I mean, there are always going to be nerds, particularly on the internet in 2020, and forever, I'm sure. As long as there's an internet, there are always going to be nerds who are like, well, this person's better, or actually I like this better, and that's all fine. And you know what? Something I probably wouldn't have said a couple of years ago that I'm happy to say now. Listen for yourself. Everybody streams music. You have a device in your pocket where you can access basically all the music ever released. Listen to Van Halen. Listen to all the eras and judge for yourself. I mean, you can like the flashy guitar playing of the early days. You can like the songs of the Sammy era like I do, which has no shortage of impressive guitar work. But I say everybody just listen and check it out if you haven't already. I'm sure a lot of people have in the last week. And I wish there was you always hope, just like anybody does for their lives and for the people they admire, that there would be some kind of celebration and that you can put a happy ending on everything. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And it's sad to see a band who is this huge, this influential, and a band who I loved, that just see that this is how the story ends. It's just a bummer. But that's
and when you listen to the songs, go beyond the singles. Check out the deep cuts, because honestly, he didn't really miss on much. Most of his songs, like he put his trademark on.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, even songs that weren't as guitar oriented as others, it's still, they got Eddie's stamp. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you guys for listening, and thank you to the three of you for participating in this. And rest in peace, Eddie Van Halen. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more and get more of the story about how everything has happened and all the things that could have been over the next few weeks, months, even years. I hope Michael Anthony writes a book. It doesn't need to be filled with dirt, but just the story of what it was like to be there, to be on the stage during all those eras. That's a story I'd love to hear. And I imagine now that he's going to be offered tons of money to finally write it. I bet he has before. I have no doubt. But now especially, I hope he does. Just for, like I said, just for the stories, just for that bygone era of rock music when rock ruled the charts. That's the story I want to hear. And of course, if you like what we have to say, then you can follow the show at Cape Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, subscribe and share and like. You can follow Ryan on Instagram at Honey I Drunk the Beers. You can follow Jimmy on Instagram at what the hell is it? Papa Squatch something?
Papa Squatch 123.
Follow Jimmy on Instagram.
You know I got funny names.
Of course. Well, I don't remember. I knew there were numbers. I just didn't remember it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. I should have been able to commit that to memory, but the Papa Squatch thing I knew. You
can
be
follow fair, Chris.
You could follow Jack on Twitter at JackWagon85 and on Instagram at JacksonFigure1985. You can follow me on Twitter, Chris Aballo, and on Instagram at Chris Sells Out. And next week, something a little different for the show. This show is evolving and entering a new kind of phase for next week. So that's all I'm going to say. You can check it out for yourself next week and some of the circumstances surrounding it. But it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks for this show. So please subscribe and stay tuned. And until then, for Metal Jimmy, Ryan Taggart, and Jack DeFranco, this is Chris Aballo, and this was yet another experiment.